women lawyers out there who are thinking about, maybe making the switch. Any advice for them?
Talk to me. Come talk to me. We are always looking for good women lawyers who are, smart and have the bells and whistles. Think about it earlier instead of later. And also don't be afraid to ask for what you want. So I know some fabulously smart women lawyers who are doing brief writing and expert work, and they're more in a supportive role because they don't like being out in front. That role exists and is very much appreciated and needed.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Today, we've got a high profile plaintiff attorney. I'm excited to talk about some of this. Tedra Cannella is a plaintiff's attorney here in Atlanta. And like I said, she does some pretty big cases. We'll talk about a recent verdict she got, $131 million, which is, I want to learn a little bit of the details. And apparently it was a bench trial. So that is really going to be interesting. So Tedra, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your firm, sort of the types of work you do, maybe the size of your firm and all of that.
Sure. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I am a partner at Canella Snyder, which is a firm I founded with a good friend of mine, Rob Snyder. And the easiest way to describe what we do to me is fancy personal injury. So we do anything that's big damages and requires a little bit of extra money or expertise, staff, that kind of thing. And product liability is the big niche that we have. We also do other things like trucking or third party liability and a workers' injury case, premises liability, that kind of thing. And Rob does key tam, which is federal whistleblower cases, which are fun. I don't like those, but that's something that he's great at. So we're in downtown Decatur and we have 6 lawyers now. Rob and I are partners. And then we also brought on Sashi Cole, who's awesome. And she's started as a partner earlier this year. We've got 3 associates, 2 paralegals, 3 admin, including a legal assistant of mine who taught me how to practice law, retired, and then came out of retirement to help us part-time, which is maybe one of the things I'm most proud of at this firm. And we're looking to hire somebody else. So yeah, we've grown a lot in the last 2 years and it's been really fun. We have a great team. We do a lot of spitballing and collaboration and it makes every day a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it.
That's cool. You guys are growing a lot. I remember when you went out, I guess it was just 2 or 3 of you.
Yeah, that's right.
And so for those people who are not from Atlanta, Decatur is basically in Atlanta. It's inside the
Right.
perimeter, its own little city, but it's in there. That I used to live over there. They used to have this T-shirt, and I think it was Decatur was a drinking town with a festival problem.
Yes. It is kind of its little happy little walkable, yuppie hippie kind of world, but yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
It's a good place to live. There's a lot of lawyers down here. You can go out to lunch, walk to lunch, and see people and it's a good
a
community.
lot of good restaurants and a lot of good cocktails down there. So we're going to dive into all that stuff. I've interviewed a good number of plaintiff contingency lawyers of different types, but like you said, you guys do some high product liability for sure type cases. And I know that's your background, suing Ford and seatbelts and this kind of thing. Those are expensive cases, right?
They are, yeah. If you end up at trial, you'll have expenses around $1 million. So it's a big investment. We're very picky about the cases we take. We only have about 20 to 30 cases in the office at any time, and maybe 5 are product liability because they are such a big investment, time wise, money wise, resource wise, staff wise, everything.
Yeah, those experts, they can.
Right. And you buy a car to drop it on the roof. That hurts too.
Next time you do that, invite me. I want to go watch.
It's pretty
Yeah,
fun.
I started out in, I guess, my first law firm job. We did Michelin tire defense, so I played in that world a
Okay.
little bit. So yeah, it was interesting. I remember, I think it was a Ford, like a 15 passenger van or something, which are very
Right.
unstable. They flip pretty easily. And I remember we were the tire, so they sued Ford and the tire. And I remember going up to Detroit for a deposition of some Ford person. And I guess the plaintiff's attorney, I remember I was just blown away because I'm a young associate. He had nothing except a blank pad. And he took the entire deposition of this guy. I think he'd probably taken it probably 100 times. So he knew exactly what
Right.
he's going to ask. But he did it with no notes, no documents, and he's referring to these studies and all this stuff. It was amazing. So,
Yeah, it's definitely, you learn a lot about a really specific thing. So I can't fix a car, but I can tell you in minute detail how the seatbelt works. So
so,
it's kind of a weird expertise, I guess.
so maybe I should ask, are there certain cars you will not buy?
Oh, lots of
Okay.
them. Yeah, I always tell people, don't ask me if you don't want to spend a little bit of money. If you just want to buy your Honda Civic and live blissfully ignorant, then go for it. But I'm big into German cars. I like a Subaru. I like a Volvo. Those are the ones that generally are pretty reliable. But beyond that, don't ask if you don't
All
want to
right, I'm
know.
not asking. All right, well, let's go back. So, out of law school, you clerked for federal judge right out, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So, how did you like that experience? I did that as well. I thought it was incredible. Was it
Yeah.
a trial judge or appellate judge?
Is District Court Judge Hugh Lawson in the Middle District, who passed in the last year or so. It was incredible. I loved it. He was originally a state court judge. And he was one of these guys who worked in a small town, had practice in a small town with his dad, and came up that way and had been on the state court bench and then appointed by President Clinton. And he just had the most incredible instincts and zero ego. And so we had a great time. We went out to lunch every day, these little Macon meet and threes.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't take long to know all the lawyers in Macon. So, it was just a really cool year. It's a great place to be poor. I really was able to take advantage of everything on the federal clerk salary that Macon had to offer. But yeah, you get to see behind the scenes what judges are thinking when lawyers do different theatrics or make mistakes or do great things as well. And it was a kind of a street education a version of that in the courtroom. He would just kind of, on the instinct things, he would just know. And on anything that was legal, he would say, I hired you guys. Y'all are supposed to be the smart ones. You tell me what to do right. I'm going to do the right thing. So that was pretty cool to be able to be thrown into that. A little terrifying, but pretty cool to be able to have that kind of influence.
Yeah, I thought it was a good transition from the theoretical book stuff from law school
Mhm.
into the real deal practice. So you got to see
Yeah,
some of it. I mean, obviously, you didn't see all of it that happened outside of the court, but you got to see the briefs, you got to see trials, you got to see hearings, all that. It was a good transition for me. I imagine similar for you.
it really was. And just going from being dirt poor to being, regular poor was fun. And I remember seeing Judge Lawson deal with different lawyers. And so the first question, if there was a discovery dispute or something like that, his first question to me, who are the lawyers? Right. And that would immediately tell him, how to consume the information he was about to get. And you hear people say, you got to keep your credibility and you've got to preserve that. Judges talk to each other. That's 100% true.
Hmm.
Because if you walk into the room as somebody he can trust, that's going to be a different hearing than if you walk into the room as somebody who's, misbehaved in the past.
And the federal judges, since they don't have to get elected, they tend to be a
Mhm.
little harder, I'll say.
Yeah. Right. They suffer no fools.
Yeah, I remember. I'll tell you this story real quick. So I clerked in Savannah, and there was a week where we were just getting, I mean, stacks and stacks of motions and briefs. It was just like boom, it's some
Right.
discovery issue, I think, and it got to the point where judge I was clerking for was just like, all right, I don't even want to look at these. It was a Wednesday, and he went to his
Right.
secretary. He says, call the attorneys. We're having a hearing here on Friday, and these attorneys were both based out of Atlanta. And he's like, and I want the CEOs of companies here too. And
Nice.
so it was Wednesday, and they were there Friday, and they were there all day. And all of a sudden, everything got resolved real quick.
Everybody
Yeah,
could get
yeah, it was
along all of
crazy.
a sudden.
Yeah. So you went from the clerkship straight to a plaintiff's firm, right?
Yes, except for I did take a few months and I worked in the Obama campaign doing voter protection in '08. So that was fun. I was scheduled to start at my old firm, Butler Wooten, right away. but they let me take a few months to go do that.
That's
It was a
cool.
cool
So
experience.
my experience, so I've told this story before. When I was in law school, I wanted to go be a plaintiff's lawyer, but there were just so few jobs
Yeah.
that you could get straight out of law school on the plaintiff side. They want you to go work for a defense
Hmm.
firm for a while. You got
Hmm.
one of the few that apparently were out there. So,
I lucked out, yeah. It was a lot of help from people, I'll say. After I got the job, I sat down to write thank you notes to people who helped me, and just looking at how long the list was kinda I remember that sticking with me, just, the dean, professors, all these people, because especially figuring out who the good firms are. That was the biggest challenge for me. Who am I supposed to apply to? Who's the idiot and the ambulance chaser, and who are the quality lawyers? That's impossible to know as a law student or a law clerk. And I had a lot of help with that, and people reaching out to different firms to try to help me. So that's how that happened, really. Otherwise, I had an offer from McKenna Long and Aldridge, who doesn't exist anymore, and I was going to take it. So, for several reasons, that became clear to me that was a bad decision. And when I talked to people about it, they really went out of their way to lend a helping hand. And that's something I try to pay forward as well to other people.
so it sounds like you knew you want to be a plaintiff's lawyer. Is that right?
I think at different times I did, and sometimes I didn't. When I was in undergrad, I got burned real bad,
Hmm.
and I ended up volunteering at this camp for burn kids that the Georgia Firefighters Foundation does as a camp counselor. And that is what kind of propelled me into law. I did a couple years as a paralegal at Legal Aids before I went to school, back to school, and I loved it. I loved working for people who really needed the help, but it got very repetitive. And so I wanted to figure out a way that felt more challenging and, a little bit more dynamic. I also wanted to not be, scraping the bottom of my bank account every month to pay my bills. I remember when I was at Legal Aid in Atlanta, I walked into the conference room that had just been used for orientation for new lawyers, and they had the salary up there for ever since 1970, whatever it was when Legal Aid was founded. And it had gone up maybe $5,000, from 1970 something to 2002. And I thought,
Wow.
this is not, yeah, I don't have a trust fund, so we need to do better than this. But anyway, so I really liked working with that community. And when I did a summer at McKenna, because $2,000 a week was more money than I could ever consider having. And I thought, well, let's do that for the summer. And they put me on the product liability team. And I loved it. It was so interesting, But my first assignment was to go through a case where the plaintiff was an Emory student who'd been burned in a car. He was treated at Grady by a guy named Dr. Ingram, and he volunteered at the same camp I
Oh,
volunteered at.
wow.
And all those things were true of me too. I had gone to Emory, I went to Grady, that was my doctor. I volunteered at the same camp. And so I thought, this is a sign, I'm on the wrong side of this V. And that was kind of what made me start looking at plaintiffs firms and thinking hard about, well, this could be a good intersection between what I love doing, which is helping the people at Legal Aid, and what is interesting to me, which is this kind of expert work and, sophisticated type of practice.
And for those who maybe aren't from Georgia or who don't know, I mean, Butler Wooten, it's, I guess, has split apart and it's in different sort of pieces now, but that was the firm. I mean, big time
Yeah.
plaintiff's firm, successful firm in the state of Georgia. And so that's
Yeah.
a really good job to get, right?
It was a great job to get. Lee Martin May, who's now a federal judge, had come to our torts class first year and presented a case that she tried to $100 and some million verdict with Jim Butler, and showed us, the testing they had done and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember being so kind of wowed by this. Like, this is like Aaron Brockovich stuff over here. It's a great firm. It was a great place to learn and grow up as a lawyer for sure.
You know, I talk to plaintiffs lawyers throughout the country and I always ask how the verdicts, and every state's a little different. Some states are harder to get verdicts. In Georgia, at least recent years, there's been some big ones and a lot of big ones in all
Yeah.
types of cases. But it,
Right.
it wasn't always like that. But Butler Wooten pretty much did that a lot back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, they were the first out there getting those big verdicts for sure.
And so that's cool that you were able to get there. I'm envious. I would have loved to have gone that route. My life would be a lot different if I'd gone there.
Yeah.
But okay, so you were there. You learned a lot. You worked your way up. You made partner there, right?
Correct.
So how many years were you there?
Now, let's see. It was '08 to 20 into 21, whatever that is.
So
It's a lot of math.
Yeah, a lot of years. And at some point,
13 or 14 years, something like that. Yeah.
and it for some time, were you the managing partner there too?
I was.
So
Yeah.
tell me about that. What was that? How did your responsibilities change, if at all, in that role?
They changed some, I would say. We had a great support staff there. So, that was a firm that had been around for decades, and there wasn't a lot of need to go in and reinvent the wheel. So there was a lot of systems in place, and I didn't have to learn how to manage IOLT accounts. We had an accountant on staff. So things like that were already done for me. And I was just there saying, okay, let's think about marketing and let's do this or let's do that. But it was really secondary to practicing law. And, you know, it was interesting. I got more involved in the management side, but it was only for about a year. And I always kind of laugh like the year that I was managing partner is the year that the firm blew up and when people went their separate ways. So I don't know how good I was at it, but I tried my best.
It's funny. I guess 2 firms ago for me, I made partner when it blew up and dissolved that year too.
Right.
I was like, "Okay, I got on the inside," and then it just I
Sorry.
guess it's my fault,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So
So, that was a type of firm too. You guys are flying all over the country doing, expert depositions and all that, and you guys probably had a jet, at least one, right? That or did you have to fly commercial?
we had a plane and we had a hunting plantation and full-time investigators who were former detectives and sheriffs and things. And, we had all the tools you would need. It was a ton of overhead as well. So, there's pros and cons to all that.
Yeah. So let's talk about so while you're there, you're seeing sort of the biggest, most sophisticated cases out there.
Mhm.
You have all these resources at your disposal to really pursue those. A lot of overhead, but you guys are probably making some good money too. At some point, the firm breaks apart, and then you're on your own. So
Yeah.
what's it like having all that at your disposal to then starting your own thing and not necessarily having all that?
Yeah, it was a little jarring, I suppose, but it was a really joyful experience. So I want to say it's scary, but I didn't feel that fear. It was a decision I made. And I just never had planned to do it. I never cared if my name was in lights or if I was the, star of the show or any of those things. That was never a goal of mine in any way. So I had no website, no plan, no marketing materials, no anything. I didn't know who to call for my malpractice insurance. I didn't know anything. So, it was an adjustment. And I also didn't know if I would have any cases. I didn't think I would have any cases when I left. I figured they'd stay behind. But I was just like, I'll go do dog bite cases and slip and falls and whatever needs to be done. As it turns out, Rob came with me and we were able to amicably take the cases that we were working on. So, we had a stash of cases and that didn't become a big hurdle for us financially. We were okay. I had a HELOC on my home. I had my home equity line of credit, and that was about it. Savings, of course. But yeah, it was scary, but it was just really invigorating. I guess was the right word. I just felt like this energy about it, and I was excited.
So how much time did you have to make the decision and sort of get going? Some people see it coming. They have months. They really plan. They get their budgets.
No, yeah, it was over the weekend.
Uh,
It was not something that I had even a contingency plan for. So, I left on good terms with everybody, and I stayed in the building till the end of the year for a month or two and helped kind of transition things and all that. So it wasn't like a big pack up your boxes over the weekend and then you're gone the next day. It wasn't like that. But so I did have some kind of off ramp there, but it was not a plan. So I guess if I was going to give advice to somebody, it would be to start thinking about these things sooner than I did.
yeah. So okay. So you decided over the weekend that you're going to do it. So and you went out with your partner Rob. How did you decide that? So whether to have a partner, who it would be, and that sort of thing. Take us through that
Yeah.
thought process.
I think for me, practicing law is fun with other people. Doing it by myself, I was excited, but I always would rather practice with somebody else because that's what makes it fun. That's when you have these new ideas and you get to commiserate together and you get to share the highs and the lows and, draw straws over who's going to go to North Dakota in the middle of the winter. And it's just so much more fun to do it with somebody else. And Rob and I had been partners in Atlanta for years and just really worked well together. We really were good at kind of filling in each other's holes and kind of being like, okay, well, you're busy now, I'll take this, and I'm busy now and you'll help with this. And so we knew we were good at that already. And that's just a no-brainer to practice with Rob if you wanted to do that. Yeah.
That's so huge. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
known commodity. You guys work together. I've talked to a lot of people who are forming a partnership with someone that they know, but they've never worked
Right.
together. They
Yeah.
think it'll work, but you never really know till you're there.
You don't. I mean, it's like going on a blind date and getting married. It's wild. And Sashi joined us earlier this year, as I mentioned, and that's been an amazing addition. But we have such a good relationship. It was a hard decision to bring somebody in because we thought, what if it doesn't work? What if it goes wrong? And we're very fortunate. It's been awesome. So I think that decision it's hard. And if it goes wrong, you probably got to make that decision pretty fast and break it up. I've watched one of your other podcasts where somebody said they were about 4 months in before they weren't talking to the other partner. And, that's bad news. But yeah, we were lucky. We knew, like you said, known commodity. We're good to go. And we have very similar values as far as the kind of case we want to take, as far as our work ethic, how we view money, and how we view management. Like all those things were just very much in step with each other. So it's been a great partnership.
Yeah, all of that's so important. So take me through maybe the change in dynamic when it was just you and Rob to now having a third partner. How has
Yeah.
that sort of changed, and how have y'all made that work?
We have this big case right now, which is a key tam case. And on the other side is scattered and all the, white shoe firms. And that's been crazy busy. So we knew we needed somebody else to help carry that burden and that load. And it was just a matter of figuring out who. And Sashi is somebody who I've known for a long time. Rob didn't know her as well, but I've known her a long time. And she is universally respected and loved by anyone who's come in contact with her. So as far as the good person side of it, that was never a question. And, her work is incredible as well. So it hasn't changed the dynamic between me and Rob. It's really kind of added to the pool of resources that we have as the three of us together. We've got 3 people who care about the firm, who have good instincts, who are hardworking, and who have the capacity to bring in business. So it's really just kind of solidified everything. It's been a good move for us.
So let's talk about those key tam cases real quick. So I know
Yeah.
a little bit about them. I mean, there's some that you refer into the government, and then the government sort of takes them, and then
Hmm.
a number of years later they crack it open, and you get a check, and they announce this and all that. And then there's others that the government say, "Well, you guys go handle it." And it sounds like
Yeah.
are those the types of cases you have on the key tam stuff?
Yeah, we have some that are under seal still, so, we'll see if the government takes them. We have some this one is not under seal and it's in litigation, and yeah, the government declined, which creates a huge pool of work. And, we're the little engine that could over here with our little, 6 lawyers, and not even all those lawyers on the case, and they're dozens of lawyers deep, people we don't even see.
Mhm.
So, I know we had one in front of Judge Totenberg, and her clerk told us years later after he had left, like, when I found out there was just 4 of you on the case, it was just shocking to him because the volume of briefing and documents and all this stuff going on, it just doesn't seem possible. So you really got to be geared up to be able to handle that. And it's a lot of work. And the way it gets kind of taken into account is that your portion of the fee or the portion of the recovery goes up the more work you're doing. So it can be a great return on investment if you win and if the company has the resources to pay. But it's a huge risk as well, just like the product liability cases. And it's fun to be able to stand in the shoes of the federal government and say you represent the United States of America. And they're good cases against companies that are behaving badly. But boy, is it a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, you have multiple big firms with dozens of lawyers
Yeah.
on there. I mean, that's, impressive that you guys can hold your own. I know that is a lot of work, and that might be part of the strategy on the other side. Bury your ass in
Yeah.
work, right?
Right. I hope you can get away with something because nobody had time to look at it.
Yeah. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So Another thing I wanted to touch on, so, you're a female plaintiff's law firm partner in what I perceive as a largely male-dominated space. A lot of cowboys, walking around. So what's your perspective on that? Am I wrong? And then what are your thoughts on being sort of a high-profile female partner in the contingency space?
I think there should be more of us because it's a practice that is really well suited for women in a lot of ways. I think there's not enough or not as many as there should be because of an institutional difference in the way people hire at plaintiffs' firms. So at Butler Wooten, like you mentioned, I got a job right out of clerkship with Butler Wooten. And that's the way they used to hire, just right out of clerkship, right out of law school. And then it was pretty easy, relatively easy to recruit women. They were paying more like big law firms. It wasn't this eat what you kill kind of model. But once we transitioned as a firm, when I was there, to looking for people with 5 years of experience, the pool of women lawyers completely dried up. And so what occurred to me is when you're a woman and you start working at a defense firm, which is what the usual path is into plaintiff's work, right? You couple of years, 2, 3 years of a defense firm, and then you come over. That is the worst time to make a jump for a woman because you are then thinking about having a kid. You've collected all this goodwill. You can kind of get a little bit of a pass when you're on coming out of maternity leave. You might be able to negotiate a work from home or reduce schedule. People are going to be understanding. It is the worst time to start a new job, right? So when you're looking for somebody with a little bit of experience, that specific piece is the hardest time to recruit a woman to. So I think that that's something that we have to kind of catch law students in the front end. We have to say, ladies, think about this. It's not just these big male personalities with, I don't want to use bad language on your podcast, but
Go for it. Whatever you
it,
want to say. Doesn't matter.
it's not just these big swinging personalities out
I
here,
got you. I
okay?
got you.
You can be successful as well. And it's not a practice that rewards sitting and doing your 15-minute increments. It's a practice that rewards results. So, a mom trying to get to your daughter's recital, that's an efficient lawyer right there. If you can get your stuff done and go to recital, nobody cares. And so, I think there is a real opportunity for women to take advantage of the way plaintiff's work is structured. But the way that we hire just doesn't lend itself to bringing in people at the right time, unfortunately. We got to bring them in sooner.
Well, it seems like, I could be wrong here, but that could be an opportunity for
Yeah.
a firm to say, at this age or this age of out of law school, it's risky for everybody, but it's sort of like, hey,
Yeah.
we can design a position that works for both sides with the
Right.
idea of, the long term, right?
The long term. That's right. And I think we need to really try, it's hard for small firms, but really try to offer good parental leave policies. We do 3 months paid leave. That's really generous on the plaintiff
That's
side and very standard on the
that's
defense
very
side.
generous.
Yeah, but if you don't do that, how can you expect people to really make that decision and come over here? So it's hard, it's expensive, but it's an important thing to do. And you get a perspective and a lawyer that is not otherwise available to you. So, women plaintiffs' lawyers have a lot of advantages over men. Going out and talking to witnesses, even that easy, right? Talking to clients, being in front of the jury, those things are all uniquely going to be easier, and women will have more access to that as a general matter. So you get the benefit, you just have to pay for it.
Yeah. So for women lawyers out there who are thinking about, maybe making the switch, any advice for them?
Talk to me. Come talk to me. We are always looking for good women lawyers who are, smart and have the bells and whistles. Think about it earlier instead of later. And also don't be afraid to ask for what you want. So I know some fabulously smart women lawyers who are doing brief writing and expert work, and they're more in a supportive role because they don't like being out in front. that role exists and is very much appreciated and needed. So, ask for what you want and see if you can find it, and find some allies. Find some there. It's a small bar. The women in the plaintiff's bar, it's small, but it is mighty, and we're very loyal to each other and we help each other. So, a lot of people who'd be willing to help.
We'll say this too. And I've experienced it myself. I don't really do plaintiff's work. I've talked to non-plaintiff's attorneys, and there's this huge need for really good attorneys. And I feel like there's a huge population of really smart, badass women lawyers, well
Yeah,
credentialed, all that maybe have taken some time off to have kids or
right,
whatever. They want to put a toe back in the water. And it's sort of like they're out there and they just can't find each other.
right.
I feel like, years ago when I was a young associate, there was some recruiter or I don't know, some sort of business here in Atlanta that connected sort of the former big law.
Counsel on call,
Maybe
maybe.
I can't
Is
remember,
that what you're
but
thinking
it
of?
was like their niche was, the women. It was
Hmm.
women only from like big firms who again, they're all top of their class, really good, all that stuff, but they didn't want to work full time. And then you
Right.
had firms that had a need and were willing. Maybe the firms back then were less willing to do these sort of part-time gigs, but nowadays
For
I think
sure.
firms are wide open to it.
Yeah.
So that's a great business model. Somebody needs to get that back together if it's not.
They do. Absolutely. I would love it. I mean, the need is out there. And like you said, the population is out there. We just got to kind of pull them together in the same place. But until then, it's a very relational thing. And there's a lot of people who be willing to help.
So it sounds like culture is a big thing for you and your firm and what you're building over there.
Mhm.
And this is one piece of that. What other sorts of things are you looking at as you build your firm and build it the way you want it to be?
Yeah. So somebody said to us when we started, so we have a business coach and a variety of other things that we kind of contract out. We're big on contracting out. And our business coach, Sarah Nell Wall, she's awesome. And she met with us early on and talked to us about creating not just what we didn't want. Don't focus on what you don't want to do, but what you do want to do. Right. And so we sat down and put our heads together. And for us, we love, excellence number one, excellent work product. That's the number one thing, of course. And then we wanted to have like a workplace that was as transparent as possible, but what I now know to be called radical candor. So you say, okay, you did a wrong thing. You did a wrong thing. Here's how you do it right. Don't do it again. There's no drama to it. And it's very matter of fact, but it comes from a caring place and it's all about clarity. So we wanted to have that. And we wanted to focus on training people too. And, bringing up lawyers to be not just someone who's turning out our work product and doing the grunt work, but also somebody who's ready to take over in a case. So those were the things that we focused on doing. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I was talking to Rob this morning. The busier you get, the harder it is to focus on anything but the practice of law. So I think there's a little bit of, two steps forward, one step back on things. But overall, we're moving in the direction that we wanted to. And I'm really happy with that.
You just hit the nail on the head there. I think you have to be deliberate in what you're creating, but we get busy. It's hard. It's not easy. It's
Right.
like I want to do
Yeah.
it. We all want to do it, but sometimes you got a trial for 3 weeks. It's hard to focus on the firm during that 3 weeks and
It's
then
really
probably the
hard.
3 weeks before the trial, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You got to close cases and make money to pay the people that you want to manage. And really, we don't managing is not the goal. Like, I don't want to be a big firm with a bunch of lawyers who are going to do all the law work and I get to sit back and do whatever I'm doing. I want to manage in a way that allows me to practice law. And so that is why we do a lot. Like, we've got a COO, a fractional COO, Jill James, who is awesome. And she handles a lot of the administrative stuff. And we try to kind of push down as much of that as we can to other people so that we're practicing law. But yeah, when you're getting crushed, you don't have time to say, okay, here, let me give you this detailed feedback on this brief, because you got to do 10 more briefs. I don't have time. Mm-mm.
Yeah, and another thing about culture, that I think a lot of firms and the practice of law is just notorious about just sucking you in and just
Yeah.
dominating your life. So you've got the culture within the firm, but then also the way the effect on your family. I know you've got a daughter. I know Rob's got kids, and How do you balance sort of the home life with the firm? Can you? Is it even possible? I don't know.
I remember Lee May told me, if I hear one more CLE about firm life or work life balance, I'm going to scream. She's like, there is no work life balance. It's a joke. You know, yes and no. I think we try to do it, or at least I try to do it in fits and spurts. So there's times where I can go to every game and every, meeting and everything. And there's times where I can't. And when I can, I do it all. And we do a lot of vacations and that kind of stuff. But I'm divorced. So I'm actually single momming, which actually is a lot of, from my perspective, has been a lot easier. So I have days where I don't have my daughter and I can just kind of plow through things. That's easy. And then when I do, I can focus more on her. And Rob has his wife is at home with the kids too. So she's incredibly supportive. And we're very fortunate in that way. I have a supportive ex husband and he has a supportive wife. And it works out. I think we're doing it pretty well. But yeah, I'm better at taking vacations than Rob. He's too type A to take a vacation when he's busy.
Got to take those vacations. You got
You've
to.
got
'Cause you
to.
burn out.
I
Yeah.
agree. Hmm.
So another thing I want to ask you about, we sort of touched on it, but you did big cases before. You still do the big cases that take a lot of
Right.
investment. A big issue with plaintiff practices is the ebbs and flow of the cash flow.
Yeah.
You're 1 minute swimming in it, and then for long periods of time, you're not. So how do you,
Yeah.
number one, balance the cash flow issues, but then also the financing issue for these big cases? How have y'all learned to deal with that?
So we've been fortunate. We have a healthy 7-figure line of credit. We don't really use it unless, we use it for the key tam case, but we don't use it for other cases. So we've just self financed and we've been fortunate that way. And that's another place where it's good to have a partner who sees things the same way you do. So we would both rather leave money in the firm and not have to worry about, did I make that decision because we needed money or did I make that decision because it was the right decision? Right. That is never a place where I want to be. So we keep enough money in the firm to pay the bills, to pay the case expenses. And we haven't had any problem there, which has been very fortunate. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that go into that because if you look at, I know some people charge interest to their clients. So these big case expenses, we don't do that because for us, that's how we justify our contingency fee, right? I mean, we're the ones taking the risk and we're the ones bearing the cost. And so we haven't done that. And that's just, we're on the same page about it, which has been nice. But yeah, you can get a big line of credit and pay it off, run it up, pay it off, run it up, pay it off. But maybe we'll do that one day, but that's just not how we've had to do it yet.
Another thing, the you and Rob being on the same page on the financial piece, keeping money in the firm and all, that's huge. I've seen partnerships where, you've got one that's a spendthrift that just is always like,
Mhm.
give me more money. I got to do this, that, and the other. And it creates a lot of tension when one is
Yeah.
maybe doesn't need it or doesn't want to spend it. So that's huge. So you guys are on the same page. All right. So we talked about it earlier. We teased it. So you had recently, I think, $131 million verdict that was on a bench trial. So I want to hear more about that. I mean, that's a big verdict with a
It's a
jury,
big verdict. It was not a
but
jury. It
with a
was a
judge.
federal
Yeah.
judge.
Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, that was a products case. It was a baby of mine. I got that. I worked on that case right about when I made partners when I started working on it. And so it was a labor of love. Our client was the wife of a guy who was on his way home from work. He swerved going down the highway to avoid a turtle in the road, went off the road and couldn't get control again because it was a big steep hill and hit a cluster of trees. And his airbag didn't go off and his seatbelt spooled out 20 inches, which is a lot. Yeah, and that's not normal. So we took the case, we filed it in federal court. We had a judge who was not sympathetic to our cause by any means. And we resolved it against, we call them OEM, the auto manufacturer. And we kept it pending against the seatbelt manufacturer, which was a really unusual choice at the time. So oftentimes we would file against a component manufacturer just to get their documents, and then we'd end up letting them go because we've got the big guns here. They're the ones who made all the decisions supposedly, and so let's just focus on one defendant. But in this case, we kept the seatbelt manufacturer because we felt like it was such a bad design. It was a component that could never be safe in any car. You should never have 20 inches of spool out ever. The Micah, who was in the car driving, he hit the steering wheel so hard that you could see the stippling, that the steering wheel dots,
Mhm.
on the grip.
Yeah.
You could see it in the autopsy picture on his
Oh,
face.
man.
So it's never a good design. And we thought, these guys should have never sold it. They should have never manufactured it. So let's take a swing at them. And we lost on summary judgment. The judge that we had found that the seatbelt, even though these guys manufactured it, it said manufactured by Autoliv on the seatbelt. He said they're not a manufacturer under the law. And so he granted summary judgment. Autoliv had sent our client an OOJ. So losing summary judgment meant she was on the hook for some of their attorney's fees. And that was devastating to me, to her. It was awful. And we thought, well, if we go appeal this, we knew it was wrong, but if we appeal it, we get back down, we're going to have this judge who hates us. We're going to try the case with him, making all the decisions. Maybe we'll be responsible for even more attorney's fees, right? So it was a big risk. But at the end of the day, we went ahead and appealed it. And in the 11th Circuit, which is no friend
Yeah.
to plaintiffs' lawyers, right? So we get up there and I argued it, and it was such a fun argument. And they were kind of like, didn't you manufacture it? And they turned it around. They reversed it in 5 days. 5
Fast.
business days, yeah, which is really rare. So we go back down, and right about the time it gets reversed, our trial judge announces he's going to retire. So I think we got the decision in April, and he was going to be gone in June or July. And so there was this fear, right, that as his last act of hatred, he would put us on the trial calendar and, we'd have to try it in front of him. But it ended up working out that we got a new judge assigned. And very fair judge, very balls and strikes judge, known for just calling them like they are. And so, we elected a bench trial. And
Yeah, take me through that. Why bench trial versus jury trial?
well, we had done it multiple times before. And the thinking is, when you have a really strong defect like that, right? You don't take a case unless it's a great defect and a great case, because they're too risky. But so when you got a great case like that, the defense strategy is to just throw a bunch of baloney defenses and hope you catch one of 12 jurors and hope you get a compromise verdict. And we said, well, we don't, we just want somebody who's going to look at the facts. We don't want to risk that and just give a good verdict. Right. So it usually the defense will always say no, which is funny because, right, on appeal of a big verdict, they always say, oh, the jury they were just inflamed, and they were out of control. And so, when you say, well, we want to do a bench trial, but they didn't want to do that. So it kind of helps there. That was a Jim Butler design. It was very effective. But anyway, the defense lawyer, the defendant, agreed to the bench trial. And we thought, great, we can try this case quick. We cut through all the baloney, all these silly things they're going to argue. They probably won't even argue them. Well, it turns out they did. And yeah, it was a 27 compensatory verdict with 50% of the fault on our defendant and 50% on the original manufacturer, and then 100 million in punitives. Yeah, right. And in Georgia, which of course the judge knows, 75% of that goes to the state. And, that it sounds like a big number, but for a company like Autoliv, it wasn't. And he knew that. And so it was a really fair verdict in our view. And it went up on appeal. There wasn't a lot for them to appeal, but they did appeal. And we appealed too, because we felt like the 50%, we should recover the whole verdict instead of the 50%. So we each had our issues. And then while it's on appeal, it resolved.
Well, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was great. I will say it's a really weird experience to get a 9-figure verdict over email, just a docket entry. I was just making breakfast for my daughter, and I looked down and my phone's blowing up, and I was like, what's
Oh,
going
man,
on?
that's
Check
awesome.
my email.
Yeah, that's cool. Just out of nowhere. It's like winning the
Yeah.
lottery out of nowhere.
It was, the blood, sweat, and tears that went
Yeah.
into that case, 9 years,
9 years.
2 appeals, yeah,
Wow.
and just a ton of risk for a client who believed very much in getting the news out about this defect, and, super gratifying.
Well, that's really good. Congrats on that.
Yeah,
That's really good.
thank you.
So another thing I wanted to talk about, in building the firm, A lot of people, it's all about the people and the whole hire slow, fire fast, and, get the right people in the seats, A players to get right for culture. All that's true. All that's true. So, what's
Yeah.
been your experience in terms of building your team and building the firm?
Oh, I heard a study, and I think it's probably right, that you have more success hiring people off the resumes than meeting with them and then making a decision because your biases slip in and people are on their best behavior, and you really can know somebody in a couple of interviews. So I've never had the guts to go that route and not interview somebody, but I will say I have been wrong so many times. There was a point where Rob and I were like, we just don't know. We can't, we're not good at it. We're bad. We can't hire. So I think we've done our best. And some people have worked out and some people haven't. And the things that we try to focus on are making sure we see our own faults in somebody not succeeding, right? So somebody's not succeeding. The number one thing we do is say, what are we doing wrong? Right? We haven't been clear. We haven't, told them what they need to do. And we haven't given them enough instruction because the people we hire are smart. They care about the work, right? And so that's kind of where we start from. And once we've been clear and met with somebody and kind of made sure that they're have the opportunities and the ability to speak up if there's some hitch in the giddy, right, that we can fix. Once we've done all that, if it's not a good fit, we accept it, right, and say it's not going to work. We got to move our separate ways. So it's not a decision that we try not to belabor it. Now we have in plenty of situations, but we've made some hard decisions on letting people go. And I think that's why I said, mentioned to you earlier, I think hiring is less important than firing because when you hire, you have almost no information. When you fire, you have a lot of information, right? And so you can't expect yourself to make a perfect hiring decision, but you should expect yourself to make a good firing decision. And my experience is people know they're not doing a good job and they feel horrible about it, right? So some of the happiest people I know have been, post firing, finding the right fit. And it's just kind of self important to think, well, if they can't keep this job, they'll never be happy. Like, I'll make them too sad. Like, no, you're keeping them from the job that they're good at, right? And that's going to use their strengths appropriately. So I try to kind of reframe that as far as building and developing our team and our minds. And hopefully, we've done a pretty good job. I hope whoever's listening to this doesn't think they shouldn't apply because they're going to get fired. But I think the good people know that, you come in, you do a good job, that gets rewarded, right? We want to pay people well. We want to respect their time. We want to listen to them and give them a voice and decision making and growth and all those things. That's the kind of team we want to have.
I'm with you. I think some people, like you said, they know it's not a good fit, and it's sort of a relief to them. Although,
Yeah.
let somebody go. It's not fun. You feel bad about it, but it's funny. My friend Ben Glass, he talks a lot, about letting someone go, and lawyers tend to keep people on much longer than really they should. They're like, oh, well, they're a nice
Yes.
person. They're this, and sort of he says, look, if all you can say is they're a nice person, that's a big red flag. And
Right.
the big question is, knowing what you know today, if they came to you, would you hire them? And if the answer is not a hell yes or a strong yes, then you probably need to let them go.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's hard though. And you invest so much time in people too that you want to believe.
Yeah. All right. So I want to touch real quick on how you get your cases. So you're doing low volume. You're a low volume shop with big
Yeah.
cases. So how do you guys market? I assume it's attorney referrals, but how do you get your cases?
Yeah. So almost all of our cases come from other lawyers. So we don't have to do a lot of the social media. We don't do obviously any TV or radio or anything like that. We help people. So lawyers need things, we're always happy to help people. We just speak at different things, and we've got a marketing team. That's another thing we've contracted out. So they do the LinkedIn posts and all that kind of stuff with our approval. But, really it's just been personal relationships and just making sure that we're available to people. I mean, if you need help on a case and you just need a brief, I'm going to send it to you. So, we build relationships that way. And really, it's been a lot of friends, or maybe every once in a while somebody who heard a CLE or something like that. But most of it is just relationship building, which is just being like out there and having friends, which is actually, it's a kind of a fancy word for be a normal human being. And that's worked pretty well for us.
Get up from behind your desk and go hang out with people, right?
Right. Right. And do good work.
Yeah.
We've got these great results. And so people don't have to feel like they're doing us a favor sending us a case because they know they send us a case. We're going to get a good result and they're going to get a good check and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So that's the number one thing.
So obviously you're here in Georgia. Do you do work around the country and other areas too?
We do. Yeah, we've got cases. Let's see. I've got one in Florida now. We've got one in, I think it's in Kansas. Obviously, plenty of Georgia cases. So we've had them all over the place. If they're the right fit, the right case, especially a products case, those are big cases that justify the travel and that kind of thing. But yeah, we take them all over the place.
So within the products space, are there particular niches within that you do, or is it just any type of product case?
Everything. Right. Our specialty, and this is not my best marketing pitch, it doesn't have like a snappy name, but what we're really good at is fighting the big dogs, right? So we are really good at fighting document battles and doing expert discovery and uncovering people hiding things and that kind of stuff. We're great at that. And so that translates. I don't need to know exactly how a carburetor works. I don't need to know exactly how the seat works. I can figure that out with talking to an expert in a day. So it doesn't matter which defect it is. It's more about the machine that we've built that can fight the big fights.
Yeah. So let's shift back to your firm. You've been doing it for 2 years now, so you got
Yeah.
a little time under your belt. So what's been some of the biggest challenges in getting the firm off the ground and just keeping it running?
I think the people, hiring the right people and equipping them, taking the time to train them and taking the time to listen to them and to put in processes and procedures and all that kind of stuff. We got FileVine, which has been a very polarizing experience.
How long did it take? I'm here. It takes forever to get implemented.
I can't speak to that without risking getting sued by FileVine for
Well, they're not a sponsor,
defamation.
so we can say whatever we want.
I mean, we have 4 terabytes of data. Okay. So, big cases, big document productions. And we kept saying that to everybody. And they kept being like, oh, we can do it on a weekend, and nobody really heard us. So that was frustrating because it ended up taking 2 different companies. One company actually quit. They resigned trying to transfer our data.
Oh man,
And so FileVine graciously paid a more sophisticated company to get involved, but it ended up taking 6 months just to get the data in.
dang.
So, that's no customization, not even using it the first day. So that was frustrating. And I've got a love hate relationship with it, obviously. It's definitely increased our efficiency on some basic things and task tracking. Awesome. Love it for a lot of things. But, you know, trying to get the firm in a place that is efficient without losing the kind of sophistication that we have around some things is a challenge. And just making sure we're properly staffed and that everybody has the tools they need and the training they need while we're also doing excellent work in these big cases. That's a lot of balls in the air. But that's why we have me and Rob and Sashi. And so together we've been working on it. I think we're doing a pretty good job.
The whole tech stack issue. Like I know I'm about to rehaul our entire tech stack because what used to work is not working anymore,
Right.
and I'm trying to hold off as long as possible because I just know it's going to be a pain in the ass. And the other
It's a
thing is
nightmare.
like, you think I want to get something that can scale with this because I don't want to have to do it again anytime
Never
soon.
again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's that hiring and firing decision all over again, right? I mean, you put so much time into it. There's like the thought of getting rid of FileVine right now. I have to shove it out of my mind. It's too awful to think about. But,
To be fair to File, I know people that have had, I'll say, challenges getting it implemented, but a lot
right.
of people love it once it's there.
Yeah,
And then, I think every practice management system out there is flawed in some way, and there's no
that's
perfect
it.
system, and you just sort of got to get the one that works best for you, and then just ride it as much and
Yeah.
as long as you can.
Right. Until your employees just finally say, okay, fine.
And that's the other thing.
We'll
You
do
got to get
it.
people to use it. That's the other piece.
You
Yeah.
gotta get people to use
Yeah.
it. Yeah, no, it's not terrible. It has a lot of benefits, but yeah, nobody likes to learn a new thing, and nobody wants to do something different and take the time to figure it out. And it's not good in some ways, and then I like the old system better for this or that thing. So that's been a challenge. But as far as the practice, I mean, it's just been honestly. People I always encourage people to think about starting their own firm because there is nothing better than being the captain of your own ship. I think. And I just didn't even think about it until it was upon me and I did it. And I think it's worth exploring the idea, even if you don't think it's like your personality or it's not worth the risk or whatever. It's honestly so fun, and it has made the practice of law a really joyful experience coming in the office every day. 9 days out of 10, I leave here thinking, what a fun day. It was a good day. I liked it.
So for those out there that are thinking about it, and this is the time of year when, we're in October. This is the
Yeah.
time of year when people are really starting to think about it for a January start. What advice would you give somebody out there thinking, I'm going to start my own firm?
Oh, I would say number one, get your home equity line of credit in place before you leave. That's the practical piece. And the other one is make a list of people who you think would help you, you know, send you cases and just help with the administrative stuff and start having lunch with them. Just talk about it.
Yeah, that's so. There are a lot of people out there who've done it. A lot of people out there that are willing to help. So
Yeah.
that's huge. Well, Tedra, thank you for doing this. This has been fun. Again, congrats on that huge recent verdict. And it's
Thank
good to
you.
hear that you've resolved it and I presume collected it. You don't have to say whatever it was you resolved. So for people out there that maybe have some cases they want to talk with you about or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
We're in Decatur, but just shoot me an email. I'm easy to get in touch with. Tedra@CanellaSnyder.com.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. It's fun to talk.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.